Hey, I'm Blair, and today we're going to talk about how to fix the PS5 DualSense controller. Sony's DualSense controller for the PS5 is no doubt the best controller I've ever used in my life, and I've been gaming for a really long time. My first console was the GameCube way back in the day. My brother and I have had the PS2, the Xbox 360, the PS4, and the PS5's DualSense controller is by far the most incredible controller I've ever used in my life. When games take full advantage of everything, all the features that they've built into this controller, it's incredible. Astro's Playroom is still, to this day, the number one example of how incredible this controller is. I highly suggest you guys play that game if you have a PS5 and haven't yet played it. There's nothing like it. I've never had a gaming experience like that, and it's a phenomenal controller. One thing that is going to be absolutely infuriating for anybody who plays PS5 or really any modern console is stick drift. It's not a new problem. We've seen it for quite some time with especially the Switch. It's been a big problem, but it's definitely affecting the PS5 DualSense controllers. Now, I've had two PS5 controllers affected by this actually. This white one here is the one that I got with the PS5 when I originally bought it. And then probably a year after that or so, I got this nice black one so that my wife and I could play together. So interestingly, I had the white one for about 2 years and the black one for about 1 year before they both started experiencing stick drift around the same exact time and in the same exact way. And it's an incredibly frustrating experience when you're playing a game that's a lot of fun, but your character just kind of keeps moving in some weird direction, not the way that you want them to. It really messes with your gaming experience. It's an incredibly frustrating thing, and I think, unfortunately, if you're a PS5 owner using this DualSense controller, this is something you're going to experience at some point in time. So this video right here is going to tell you exactly how we can solve those issues. I did a whole bunch of research on how to fix this controller, watched a lot of videos, read a lot of articles. A lot of things will tell you, either you can do simple, kind of hacky, quick fixes that maybe they'll solve the problem for a week or so, something like that. This is stuff like blowing compressed air into these joysticks, kind of rotating the joystick, some people say. A lot of people have suggestions on quick fixes and they don't really last long term. I tried them all, none of them were really effective in the long run. Stick drift is a mechanical issue at the end of the day, and you're going to need to solve that mechanical issue if you want this to go away and stop bothering you. A lot of other people who are trying to teach you how to do this will tell you that you need to replace the entire analog stick module. Now that requires soldering. I don't know about you guys, but I don't really like to mess around with hot irons when I don't have to. I don't really know anything about soldering, so it's not something I was comfortable with. The exact solution that ended up working for me and finally solving this issue long term, I didn't see that anywhere. So that's why I'm making this video here today. It's pretty incredible how cheap it is to fix the component. If you're like me, you were really hesitant to want to drop $70 on another new controller when you know the stick drift issue hasn't been fixed by Sony at the structural level. It's still there. So this fix worked really well for me, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. It's really pretty simple. It's not daunting. Just take your time, walk through the steps with me. Almost everything you need to fix this that I'm going to walk you through, you should have something that works in a similar way, if not the exact tool I'm talking about, laying around the house somewhere. It's all really cheap parts. It's surprisingly easy to take this thing apart. I'm also going to link down below a walkthrough article from iFixit if that's kind of more your speed. Instead of watching a video, they do have a really great step-by-step walkthrough with pictures of how to take apart your PS5 controller safely, getting all the way down to the joystick components, which is what we need to get to. When I was working on this, I actually only had to buy one thing, which was an 8-pack of potentiometers. That's what the piece is called that typically goes bad in these controllers. It's called a potentiometer. I don't know what it does, I'm not a physicist. The pack that you buy on Amazon comes with 8 replacement potentiometers. For me, the stick drift on both of my controllers was actually coming in this left analog stick, the movement stick, and there's 2 sensors per analog stick. So I used 2 in this controller, 2 in that controller, meaning I used 4 out of my 8 replacement potentiometers. So I actually still have 4 left. So the next time the potentiometers in them start to wear out, I still have those 4 more that I'm gonna need to replace them. You can see once you get that part out of your controller that's causing the stick drift, you can see why it's causing the stick drift. It's worn out compared to the new parts, which is kind of interesting to see. Finally, if you are wondering about the success or the longevity of this replacement? Is this really going to solve your issue? Is this going to be something that pops back up in a month again and you're just going to have to go buy a controller or whatever? Well, I have really good news about that. I made this replacement in actually both of these controllers that I own at the same time back in March 2023. It's now about mid-October 2023, and I'm really happy to report that this has solved my issue completely. I haven't experienced any stick drift since I went ahead and replaced these components. Now, I'm sure at some point in the future, these potentiometers are going to wear out again, because at the end of the day, they're a physical piece in the controller. It's a part that's going to wear out again. But my hope is, I've extended the life of this version of those sensors for hopefully another year, maybe even 2, depending on how much I wear them out. But at least now I know how to solve it going forward. And the problem's pretty much solved because the piece is super cheap. It's easy to take these apart and get the new components switched in within 10 minutes, so no problems on my end. Now, the link to purchase these replacement potentiometers can of course be found in the description below. And while you're down there, it would mean a lot to me if you hit that like and subscribe button. The support I got on my first video was really incredible. You guys were super kind and encouraging, and that really means the world to me. So if you could give me a like and subscribe while you're down there, that would be massive. Thank you. My favorite thing about this replacement process is that you don't need a soldering tool. You don't need anything crazy. So here are the parts you do need. First thing is a very tiny screwdriver. It's basically just a very small Phillips head screwdriver. That's the type of screw that you're going to find inside of the controller. So anything with a head small enough to grip those tiny little screws. You're going to need some sort of soft plastic prying tool. If you have something that's kind of longer, almost pencil shaped, that should work great for you. For me, I actually used just a guitar pick that I had laying around, and that worked really well. You don't want to use a metal pick or prying tool because you can actually nick up the controllers themselves and actually do some damage to some of the parts inside of it. So use this soft plastic tool, help yourself out a little bit there, and you should avoid any damage in prying some pieces apart here. You could get some soft tweezers as well. Those might be helpful for you. And it's kind of funny, the potentiometers just come in this really tiny little plastic case here. I'll open it up. This is what we're actually going to pry open, and then the sensor is this little circular white sensor in there. So you actually don't need most of the stuff in this box. All you need is that replacement white sensor there. You'll see what I mean when I do the better top-down shots, but that white sensor is, we're just gonna basically take it right out of this replacement housing that it has here, pop it right in the one that is in the PlayStation controller. They're gonna send you more than you need in this potentiometer replacement set, so just keep that in mind. But it's nice, it's super affordable, and it's just such a good way to replace your controllers for cheap.
Alright, so we're going to get started here with dismantling the controller. And the first step here is taking your soft pick. For me, I'm using that guitar pick, and you're going to wedge it in basically where these black plastic pieces meet the white plastic pieces right here at the bottom of each handle. When you get that soft pick in there far enough, it should just pop right out. Once you get both of those out, you can basically just gently work it out from bottom up. It should snap out without too much of an issue. Don't snap anything too hard, but it's really not that challenging to get that piece out. Next, we're going to grab our tiny little screwdriver here, and we're going to have 4 screws to take out. There's one in each one of these handles. So let's actually start with that. We're just going to go ahead and unscrew them. They're both very tiny, so make sure you just keep track of them. Probably put them somewhere away from your workspace so that you don't end up accidentally bumping them and knocking them off into a carpet or somewhere that they could be challenging to find, because as you're going to see here, they are extremely tiny. 1 screw, of course, in each one of your handles. And there's the second one. So once you get the 2 at the handles out, the next thing you're going to need to do is pop out each one of the bumpers. So that's LB and RB button. You're going to want your soft pick for this. And you can basically just pull back one of the triggers, insert the soft pick in there, and just kind of twist and slightly lift, and then you can see mine literally popped right out. It comes out pretty easily. just pull that trigger down, open up a little space for yourself with that soft pick, and then like I said, just kind of twist that soft pick and slightly lift. It really doesn't take much to wedge these out. That one I was a little bit more careful with. So once you've got both of those bumpers out, you're going to expose the next two screws that are holding in the back of the controller housing. So you can see them right here as I'm showing you. And those are going to be the next two screws that we're going to remove, of course. Alright, we've got all four screws out now. Next thing we're going to do is remove the back half of the white controller housing. So same thing, you're going to grab that soft pick and kind of work your way up one of the handles, starting at the bottom. Before you go too far with this though, there's two tabs right near the PlayStation button on the controller, and you need to disconnect those first. So go ahead and stick your wedge in there, make sure both of those are disconnected, and now the rest of the back of the controller will pop off super easily, as you'll see here in a second. Use that soft wedge if you need to help disconnect it, but again, it doesn't take too much pressure or anything to pop that piece off. So now the back piece has been removed, we can get that out of the way. So what you're left with is the front of the controller, and then obviously all of the internals. First thing we're going to get rid of is the battery itself. That's this little gray piece that I'm holding on to right here. All it's connected by is basically three small cables and a little connector. So just gently wiggle out that connector. All of this stuff is going to come out very easily. You don't need to use a lot of pressure or a lot of power or anything like that. So battery is super easy to get out. Next thing we're going to do is take out the housing of the battery, which is basically just where it sits. There's one screw there, that's all that's holding that in. So here it is, you can just unscrew that. It's the same exact type of screw as the other ones. Very small, so store it with the others. And then this black plastic piece where the battery sits should be able to pop right out. There's one little microphone component that you can see me pulling out right here. Make sure you keep track of that one, of course. It's a really tiny component there. It's the microphone on the rear of the controller. But once you set that aside, you can set aside the battery housing as well. And we're getting closer. Now there's four cables connected to the motherboard, one on each side, one on the top and one on the bottom. So go ahead and take the orange ones out first, those are the easiest. One on each side there, connecting the trigger modules to the motherboard. Next I'm going to remove this ribbon right here. There's one ribbon on each side of that middle bottom part. So we removed the left side when we took off the battery housing. Now we're removing the right side as well. The right side's not going to disconnect or anything like the other side did. And then finally this blue tab at the top. This one's got the smallest pull tab, so if you've got fat fingers like I do, it might be a little bit difficult to take off, but it'll disconnect for you. And then once you've disconnected all four, you can gently push through those analog sticks, and you're basically going to flip over that motherboard like you just saw me do. It's going to stay connected to the rest of the controller, so don't pull it apart or anything like that. Be gentle with it. It's connected by tiny cables on each side. But once you kind of get that flipped out, you can take off each one of the analog stick caps. Those just pop right off super easily. And now we've finally reached the analog sticks housings that we need to actually make adjustments for. So you can see on each one of these analog stick housings, there's a teal kind of window. You're going to see my finger right here, just pry one of them back. So this right here, that white circular component you see inside there, that's the potentiometer that we need to replace. We're not going to remove the teal square component on this analog stick. That needs to stay in. So be gentle with that when you do peel that back. But I'm going to grab my tweezers right here and just take out that potentiometer. going to see a comparison of this potentiometer, which has been in this controller for about 7-8 months, versus what a brand new one looks like. But that kind of orange discoloration is essentially the problem here. These pieces just wear out over time. Here's the tiny box of replacement pieces that I ordered on Amazon. What they send you, the piece that we need is, of course, the same teal color as what you see inside of the controller right now. But we actually don't need that teal component. That part's working just fine. That would be if we needed to solder something, we'd have to mess around with that. But actually what we're going to do is just poke out the new white potentiometer out of this housing. You can just see I did that there. And I'll flip it over, and you can see that's basically brand new. It's basically a perfect silver color compared to the discoloration that you're seeing on the right side here with one that's been in my controller for 7-8 months now. So you can tell, obviously, which one is worn out and which one is brand new. So obviously you're going to take our tweezers and insert that new potentiometer back into the controller. Make sure you do it the right way. It's kind of U-shaped, the metal in it, and basically the U should be upside down. And what you're seeing me point to here is there's 2 of these potentiometers on each one of your analog sticks. One that measures horizontal movement and one that measures vertical movement. If you're experiencing stick drift on one of your analog sticks, you need to replace the potentiometer on both of them. As you can see, I just set that right back into the green or teal housing and snapped that right back into the controller. I'm not going to demonstrate it, but if you're having stick drift, you need to replace both of the potentiometers on your stick in order to fix that stick drift, because the odds are they're both worn out. So to recap one final time, each one of the analog stick components you're looking at has 2 of these teal doors. They each have a potentiometer inside, and they each need to be replaced if that particular analog stick is experiencing the stick drift. So now basically all we need to do is everything that we did, but in reverse. Let's start off by putting the analog stick caps back onto the components. Go ahead and flip that motherboard back over. When you do that, just make sure before you push it all the way through that you lift up each of the 4 ribbon cables so that they're not stuck underneath the motherboard. So remember, there's 1 on each side, 1 on top, and 1 on bottom, 4 in total. I'm going to plug back in this one on the bottom because it's the smallest one, it's the toughest for me to grab, so I like to get that over with first. You shouldn't have to apply a lot of pressure to get these ribbons back in there. They should slide back into their housings quite simply. The 2 on the side I find to be the easiest. They're very wide ribbon cables, they have a lot of movement. This one was giving me a little bit of trouble this time around. But once you get that in, move to the one up top. This is one of the trickier ones too because the tab is so small, but same type of thing, it doesn't take much effort to get that back into its plug. So 4 ribbons, once they have all been plugged back in, next thing you want to do is take that tiny little microphone ribbon that we removed before the battery housing. You want to take that and just plug the ribbon back into its housing near the bottom of the controller there. You want to do that before you put the battery housing back in because it'll make it easier for you to basically just lift that microphone cable back over into this tab that kind of sits at the bottom of the battery housing. It basically just sits there and slots into the nice slot at the bottom of that housing. But once you've got that properly seated, you can put the battery housing back in and screw it in. Remember, there's just 1 screw for this piece. Then we can grab the battery, plug that back into its little slot there. And the battery just sits right there in that housing. Alright, all the internals have been recompiled. Now we can snap back onto the controller the white plastic piece that is the back of the controller. Simplest way to get the back of the controller back on is to hook it over the triggers. You can basically just press them in. It'll snap into place very satisfyingly, actually, and just work your way from the top of the controller down to the bottom of the controller. And make sure you get those two tabs secured as well that are down by the bottom of the controller. Next, we need to replace our 4 screws. You can do these obviously in any order. I'm going to go ahead and start at the handles. Here I use my fingers when I get up towards the bumpers and trying to get those screws back in. I'll use tweezers. Feel free to obviously use tweezers to get these screws back in because they're very tiny screws and very tiny holes that you need to rest them in so that you can screw them back in. So tweezers will make your life a lot easier here. Just go ahead and pick up those little screws. Now we're moving on to the screws that are up by the bumpers. Place it in there real nicely with the tweezers and screw it on in. And that should do it. That should be the last of the screws that you have. If you have any screws remaining, you messed something up, go back and figure out where you messed up. But it's just those 4 screws on the outside. Everything should be nice and secure now. We're going to go ahead and pop those bumpers back in. This is extremely easy. Just set it where it needs to go and press, and it just pops right back in. Make sure you get the right bumper back on the right side and the left one on the left side. You don't want to switch them up. And finally, the final piece is getting that black plastic piece back into the controller. Definitely want to start up by the gamepad with these pointy pieces first. They sneak underneath this little hole that is there for them. But you just want to wedge that in there and then gently snap the rest of this black piece in. Same type of thing as the white back of the controller. It's a very satisfying snap. Make sure you snap it in all the way around, but that should do it. Our controller is back in one piece, and the potentiometer has been fixed.
So there you have it. Follow these steps I just walked you through, and if your situation was anything like mine, your stick drift issue should be resolved on your PS5 DualSense controller, which I hope is a big relief to you like it was for me. Now, the best thing that would hopefully happen in the future is that Sony finally wises up whenever they make the PS6, I guess, and replaces these faulty potentiometers with Hall sensors. I don't really know what Hall sensors are, but I've been reading about them a lot. A lot of the articles I read when I was researching for this issue mentioned these Hall sensors and how they're immune to this wear out over time, and it's a much better analog stick sensor. So I really hope that Sony wises up and freaking uses that part in these controllers, because they're too damn good to be suffering from an issue like stick drift. It's infuriating, it's a bad user experience, and I really hope Sony does the right thing and replaces these bad potentiometers in the future. It's by far the worst thing about this incredible controller, and it absolutely needs to be fixed. So, like I mentioned, if you like this video, I hope you got some value out of it, and I hope it solves your issue, because I know how annoying stick drift is. So like I said, if you found this video helpful, please help me out by hitting the like and subscribe button down below. It would really mean the world to me. I appreciate you guys, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.